Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Surabhyaya Namaha
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 Mukam karoti vasalam pangum langayate girim Yatkripatamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataram Yatkripatamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataram Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Bhagavatam class and congratulations to all of you for being the first students sitting in the Vidyapitam. Today, 21st of December 2020, making history. Yeah. When you do something for the first time, often, not all the time, often you have some realizations. And I'll share that realization a little bit later on. But we will immediately go to our text. We are reading from Canto number 1, chapter 1 as well. Questions by the sages. And I believe today is text number
15.
15. Yat pada samsrayaha suta munayaha prasamayanaha sadyaha punanti upasprishtha swardhuni apo nusevaya Yat pada samsrayaha sutta munaya prasamayanaha sadya punanchu paspritaha swardhunyapo nusevaya Yat pada samsraya sutta munaya prasamayanaha sadya punanchupasprista swardhunyapo nusevaya Yat pada samsraya sutta munaya prasamayanaha sadya punanchupasritaha swardhunyapo nusevaya Yat those I'm sorry whose pada lotus feet samsrayaha yeah, Mataji can see that. Put that up a little bit that way. Yeah. Samsrayaha Those who have taken shelter.
Those who have taken shelter.
Those who have taken shelter of.
Those who have taken shelter of.
Sutta.
Sutta.
O Sutta Goswami.
O Sutta Goswami.
Munayaha.
Munayaha.
Great sages.
Great sages.
Prasamayanaha.
Prasamayana.
Absorbed in devotion.
Absorbed in devotion.
To the Supreme.
To the Supreme.
Sadhyaha.
Sadhyaha.
At once.
At once.
Punanti.
Punanti.
Sanctify.
Sanctify.
Upaspristaha.
Upasprishta.
Simply by association.
Simply by association.
Swaradhuni.
Swaradhuni.
Of the sacred Ganges.
Of the sacred Ganges.
Apaha.
Apaha.
Water.
Water.
Anusevaya.
Anusevaya.
Bringing into use.
Bringing into use.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. Kindly repeat after me. O Sutta.
O Sutta.
Those great sages.
Those great sages.
Who have completely.
Who have completely.
Taken shelter.
Taken shelter.
Of the lotus feet of the Lord.
Of the lotus feet of the Lord.
Can at once sanctify.
Can at once sanctify.
Those who come in touch.
Those who come in touch.
With them.
With them.
Whereas the waters of the Ganges.
Whereas the waters of the Ganges.
Can sanctify only.
Can sanctify only.
After prolonged use.
After prolonged use.
Purport. Pure devotees of the Lord are more powerful than the waters of the sacred river Ganges. One can derive a spiritual benefit out of prolonged use of the Ganges waters, but one can be sanctified at once by the mercy of a pure devotee of the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita it is said that any person, regardless of birth, as Shudra, woman, or merchant, can take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and by so doing can return to Godhead. To take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord means to take shelter of the pure devotees. The pure devotees whose only business is serving are honored by the names Prabhupada and Vishnupad, which indicate such devotees to be representatives of the lotus feet of the Lord. Anyone, therefore, who takes shelter of the lotus feet of a pure devotee by accepting the pure devotee as his spiritual master can be at once purified. Such devotees of the Lord are honored equally with the Lord because they are engaged in the most confidential service of the Lord, for they deliver out of the material world the fallen souls whom the Lord wants to return home back to Godhead. Such pure devotees are better known as vice lords according to revealed scriptures. The sincere disciple of the pure devotee considers the spiritual master equal to the Lord but always considers himself to be a humble servant of the Lord. This is the pure devotional path. Translation again. O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. So again, this is the continuation of the sages at Naimisharanya, speaking to Sutta Goswami, recognizing him as a pure devotee, elevated personality. So the nice example is being given here, how throughout the Vedic literatures the waters of the Ganges, Mother Ganga, is glorified, and that is why traditionally, historically, people would settle on the banks of such holy rivers. India has many holy rivers also. And it was quite common to be close to such holy rivers, so that one, simply by regularly taking bath, one would actually become purified. One would remain healthy as well. So the point being made here, of course, is that although Mother Ganga is indeed, of course, very pure, those who are fully surrendered to the Lord, the pure devotees, the effect of simply a moment's association from such elevated souls is even more powerful than bathing in the Ganges. Therefore, that well-known phrase, Brahmate kono bhagyavan jeev, Guru Krishna prasade pai bhakti lata beach. If one is fortunate to come in contact with such elevated souls, he gets the opportunity to receive the seed of devotional service, and in this way begin one's journey out of the material world. Because that is the great gift that such personalities can give. This Bhakti Lata Beach, therefore it is nicely explained actually in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishna Bhakti Janmamul Hoy Sadhu Sangha. Krishna Bhakti Janmamul Hoy Sadhu Sangha. Until and unless one gets an opportunity, although one may be practicing spiritual life until one gets an opportunity to associate or come in contact with someone who's actually practicing bhakti. One will not be able to come out of this material world. So therefore, the primary business of such personalities is to actually travel and give opportunity to as many people as possible to again reconnect with Krishna consciousness. That is just like it is also said that visiting a holy place or holy dham is also very powerful. More powerful than visiting a holy dham is to come in contact with someone who is carrying within his heart the holy dham. Just like, of course, similar to Sutta Goswami, Vidura, also very elevated soul, referred to in the Bhagavatam as a walking tirtha. Wherever he would go, that is the potency of such elevated souls. Wherever they go, they sanctify or purify that place. Just like Srila Prabhupada, I was asking some devotees in La Nouvelle Mayapur, or New Mayapur in France, what is the most significant thing about this community or this project? And one devotee very nicely answered, the most significant aspect of this project is that Srila Prabhupada set foot on this land. Because in Europe, Prabhupada did not physically visit that many temples, and not only did he visit, but he also installed deities, personal deities, in New Mayapur. So that means that when a personality like our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, and that's why the whole world is immensely benefiting, continues to benefit also, travels to so many countries and comes in contact with so many people. Of course, most people were not realizing or understanding their great fortune. Some did, of course. The more fortunate ones continued to associate with devotees and took up the process of Krishna consciousness. The one such personality can therefore transform the whole world simply by traveling and introducing especially the message of the Bhagavatam. That is actually, of course, we understand as devotees, the greatest gift and the greatest welfare activity that one can perform by giving that opportunity to conditioned souls to again reawaken their dormant love for Krishna. So of course such personalities are very rare, but the business of a pure devotee is actually to create other pure devotees. And this is the foremost, we could say, activity of the Krishna consciousness movement, to give that opportunity to as many spirit souls to again reconnect with Krishna consciousness. So in this way, as we mentioned in the last few days, these sages at Naimisharanya are already very elevated souls, and being elevated souls, they can recognize the exalted position of Sutta Goswami, and therefore through many verses that we are reading right now, they are requesting him to actually share with them the transcendental knowledge that he carries within his heart. So we'll continue to read here a little bit. Text number 16. Kova Bhagavatastasya
Kova Bhagavatastasya
Punya Slokevya Karmanaha
Punya Slokevya Karmanaha
Suddhi Kamo Na Srinuyad
Suddhi Kamo Na Srinuyad
Yasha Kalimala Paham.
Yasa Kalimalapaham.
Translation and purport. Who is there desiring deliverance from the vices of the age of quarrel, who is not willing to hear the virtuous glories of the Lord? Purport. At the age of Kali is the most condemned age due to its quarrelsome features. Kali Yuga is so saturated with vicious habits that there is a great fight at the slightest misunderstanding. Those who are engaged in the pure devotional service of the Lord, who are without any desire for self-aggrandizement, and who are freed from the effects of fruitive actions and dry philosophical speculations, are capable of getting out of the estrangements of the complicated age. The leaders of the people are very much anxious to live in peace and friendship, but they have no information of the simple method of hearing the glories of the Lord. On the contrary, such leaders are opposed to the propagation of the glories of the Lord. In other words, the foolish leaders want to completely deny the existence of the Lord. In the name of secular state, such leaders are enacting various plans every year, but by the insurmountable intricacies of the material nature, of the Lord. All these plans of progress are being constantly frustrated. They have no eyes to see that their attempts at peace and friendship are failing. But here is the hint to get over the hurdle. If we want actual peace, we must open the road to understanding of the Supreme Lord Krishna and glorify Him for His virtuous activities as they are depicted in the pages of the Bhagavatam. So this is being very clearly expressed here that in this age of Kali, which is, as we all know, a very difficult period, the remedy by which people can quickly become delivered from their fallen condition is by hearing about Krishna, is by coming to know that there is not only that there is God, but actually that there is that these personal features of Godhead, and this is what was actually explained to the author or the compiler of the Srimad Bhagavatam, as will be described in chapters to come, that Srila Vyasadeva could himself only become satisfied and fulfilled by himself speaking directly about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And that means the same point that is being presented here, that unless individuals come to know about this consciousness of Krishna, not simply that there is God. I think you've all heard how in the early days when Srila Prabhupada was in America, even before registering the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, there's some persons who came to know that he wanted to establish a society, had recommended that Swamiji, at that time he was known as, referred to as Swamiji. People in the West, they don't know very much about Vedic culture, and it's better if you call your society the International Society for God Consciousness. And Prabhupada was very emphatic, and he said, no, my society will not be called International Society for God Consciousness. People must know who is God. The name of the society will be International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And of course, in many ways we can say that the rest is history, because Srila Prabhupada was very clear on this point, and we see through all of our other acharyas from the very beginning of the Bhagavatam as well. We see that in the writings of personalities like Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami, who are very exalted personalities, very exalted Vaishnavas. They begin their explanations just like the very first of the 6 Sandarbhas by Srila Jiva Goswami establishes from the very beginning the Vedic knowledge, and specifically the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in the Bhagavatam, the focus or the center, the most important theme of the Bhagavatam is to understand and to know about Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada was in this way, as all faithful representatives of the parampara, was simply following in the same footsteps by sticking very strongly to the name Krishna, to the whole ideology that that's why the term, Prabhupada explained one time the meaning of Godhead. There is God, but there is a head, Godhead. You may belong to some company, and there may be so many offices in that company, but there is a head office. There's a head office. There's an origin. There's a source. It's like we say Krishna is the source of all incarnations. Krishna is the source of everything. So the point being that actually until and unless we cultivate this knowledge, cultivate this understanding, we cannot get out of the material world. Unless we know about the spiritual world, specifically the abode of the Lord, Goloka, then we will remain in the material world. So in this way the sages are already speaking very nicely, and all of these different prayers that they are presenting are a prelude to what Sutta Goswami will begin to speak in the verses to come. Anyone have any comment on this?
Maharaj, you are saying that generally we used to say that we are fallen souls. We fall from spiritual world to here.
We generally say that we are fallen, or have fallen from the spiritual world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then someone was asking that if you go to there, why we fall from there, and if we go to there, then again we will fall from there.
Yes, it's a very often asked question. Why take all the trouble of going there if we're going to come back, or if we're going to fall? So, Srila Prabhupada explains how he gives the example, very simple but practical example of a child who doesn't know that fire burns, even though he may be told by his mother or father, don't put your hand in the fire. He's never put his hand in the fire. He doesn't know that he will suffer. But once having the experience of the pain of fire, once having experienced that suffering, he will not again put his hand in the fire. So this example is given to indicate, and Krishna also makes that promise, once having come in the material world, due to anyone who actually becomes conditioned, everyone becomes conditioned in the material world, we go through such a painful experience, through this cycle of repeated birth and death, and we suffer in so many different ways, that once we will have gone through all of this experience that the material world gives to everyone, painful experience, when we finally do go back to the spiritual world, something in the back of our mind will tell us, to just stay there. And so Krishna promises, once having returned to the spiritual world, one will never again return to this material world. That question was, of course, debated in the past, and I'm sure continues to be debated at different times. Why in the first place, if we were there, why in the first place we came here? And that is not, Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas explained that somehow or other, it's not so easy for us to understand how this has happened. Of course, that explanation is given. We have minute independence. And because of this minute independence, actually, theoretically, we could again, but our experience of this material world will be so profound, so strong, that we will not again come back. Yeah. So we should take that explanation that is given, and that promise that is made also by Lord Krishna, that those who, once having come in the material world, finally return to their original abode, they will not come back to the material world.
Then someone is asking that from where we came, if we didn't fall from there, this life where we come.
This life,
Yes.
we've come from another life, another body. We're going through this cycle of birth and death.
In this life, or where we come from?
In this life,
Yes.
where we come from,
Yes. If we have some experiences of this material world after going there, so we didn't want to fall from there again.
right?
So how we fall from there?
We cannot understand how we have fallen, except that because we have minute independence, this is how our acharya has explained, because we have minute independence, therefore we have misused our independence, isn't it? That can easily be understood, just like in the material world. You may want to make friendship or may want to love someone, but if that person is not inclined, you cannot force that person to like you, isn't it? So love is not something that can be forced. Love is something that is spontaneous. So the essence of God consciousness, or more specifically the essence of Krishna consciousness. Why Krishna consciousness? Because love, as Prabhupada would explain, means two. Love means two, between two individuals, two persons. So love of God means God must be a person. God is a person with whom we can exchange in loving relationships. So God has created us with this minute independence because love is meant to be spontaneous and natural. So we have this experience in the material world, and in this way we can understand that God does not force people to love Him, isn't it? So that is the proper understanding. If we, by the cultivation of this knowledge, especially of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, then if we once again, those who come in the material world, they have actually, we have become disconnected, and we have, in this way, this is how Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur nicely explains that the greatest sin for all of us, for the conditioned soul, is to have rejected Krishna. I mean, when we begin the process of Krishna consciousness, we slowly, gradually begin to understand, obviously, how great is God. I mean, the concept of greatness, the concept of appreciation, the concept of love, we have some experience in the material world, but when we hear about the position of Krishna through his different dealings with his devotees and his different activities, then the more we cultivate this, it's not only a theoretical understanding, but we actually are meant to awaken our feelings and our relationships. Just like in the material world, people fall in love, and those bonds are extremely strong. People will die, you know. Romeo and Juliet, you know. I mean, people kill on the basis of you have betrayed me. You know, they had to kill themselves or kill the one who betrayed them. So, what we see and what we experience in the material world, as we come to know when we read these literatures, are but a dim reflection of what is existing in the spiritual world. And of course, the more we are covered by the modes of material nature, we can't appreciate, we can't understand, we can't realize. So therefore, by this process of purification, which the important aspect of that purification is through the medium of saintly persons, through as mentioned in this the previous verse, through the medium of those personalities that developed and reawakened their love for Krishna. So, because we are still to different, different extent or different levels covered, therefore our ability to understand is less. therefore, as we become uncovered, as we become purified in consciousness, then we'll be able to understand and to appreciate, and gradually, that is the process, gradually reawaken and re-establish our pure original relationship with Krishna. And once that is done, and it can be done within, by this process given to us by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it can be done within this one short lifetime. So therefore, Prabhupada sometimes would directly tell some devotees, you have given so many lives to Maya, give this one life to Krishna, especially this short duration of life in Kali Yuga. So that is what Srila Prabhupada is giving us, that opportunity. Yeah. Any other?
Maharaj, these two shlokas which we discussed today, especially taking shelter of the sadhus, is taking the hearing from them and hearing their instructions.
Yes.
So often we see within practicing devotees, within practicing
devotees, yeah.
sadhakas, that there is one set of devotees who make themselves always be around some transcendental sound. Either it would be hearing of lectures or kirtan and all like that. So kirtan and all we can understand, but there is sometimes the devotees, they keep on hearing lecture after lecture, lecture after lecture, lecture after lecture. Continuously they keep hearing as a habit.
Okay.
But what we see is that later on, not in all cases, there are a few cases which we see is that the transformation doesn't happen in their consciousness as well as their attitude of how they came, same way they are even after so many years of hearing also. So why exactly that thing happens? And on the other side, there are some devotees who are hear very sacredly, like they don't hear anything and everything at any time. They give the importance for that hearing,
Yes.
of the culture of hearing. So why actually this thing happens? Even if somebody is hearing, yesterday also you were telling in the class that even unwillingly also somebody hears, there is a advantage.
Yes, there is benefit. There's always benefit in hearing, but just like Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, that there are three ways by which one can actually take up nicely to Krishna consciousness. This very well-known verse, Tad vidi pranipatina pariprashnena sevaya. So, in other words, one must, after hearing, put into practice what one has heard. It is not, we are, Prabhupada would explain, we are chanting the holy name, which is a prayer, my dear Lord, please engage me in your devotional service. So if we simply chant the holy name and don't engage in devotional service, then of course only very rare souls like Haridas Thakur can just continue to chant. Most of us have to, engage in concrete and practical activities of service, of devotional service. So, Prabhupada was quite clear on this point, that the mission and the urgency for spreading Krishna consciousness is so great that we should be content to chant 16 rounds, and here, of course, every day, Bhagavatam class, but we should be engaged also in concrete activities for pushing on the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We are part of the greatest mission, most important mission, and therefore there is at this particular point in time a very urgent need for people to leave Vrindavan, for example, and to preach Krishna consciousness, or to go out of our temples and bring this message. In other words, another very important aspect, that Krishna consciousness is not meant simply to be an individual and personal affair. And Prabhupada would give that example. Many people are practicing spiritual life, but very often they'll be doing that primarily for their personal salvation. And you know, it can be very nice for someone to just be locked up in a cave somewhere. For those few people who could do that, not many. In other words, there's a selfish aspect to one who just concentrates or focuses on his own salvation. Rather, the mood and the mentality and the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is to bring this message of Krishna consciousness to as many people as possible. In other words, anyone who has received the holy name, and this is the prayer of Prahlad Maharaj, I am able to chant the holy name. For me, my life is perfect. I have no anxiety whatsoever. But because I know so many people who are not chanting, who don't have the holy name, who don't know about Krishna consciousness, therefore I am anxious for them. This is the mood of all of our acharyas. If Srila Prabhupada did not have that mood and mentality, he would have just remained in Vrindavan, isn't it? So the foremost quality for a Vaishnava, as we hear, is the quality of compassion. One is actually feeling for the suffering of others, and it's, you know, it's it's actually something very intense for those personalities of the caliber of Srila Prabhupada. They are constantly meditating, and they are in great anxiety, and they understand. Somebody once asked Prabhupada, "Why are you so forceful and often speaking very heavily against Mayavadis?" And Prabhupada explained that because they are misleading. They are, by their teachings, by their false teachings, that there's no personality of Godhead. There's only Brahman, and we are God ultimately. They're actually doing the greatest disservice to people by keeping them in ignorance. Because, as we've heard, especially through the Bhagavatam, unless we come to know about that personality of Godhead, that personal feature, the Bhagavan feature, which is revealed in the early chapters of the Bhagavatam, then we can't develop our love for Krishna. Means we can't get out of this material world. We remain here entangled under the clutches of the material nature, the modes of material nature. So this is the foremost quality of an actual Vaishnava. He feels, he cares for, he's aware, of the suffering, and he knows the cause and the reason. People are suffering because they don't know about Krishna. They don't know about Bhakti. They don't know about Bhagavad Gita. When we read the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, for example, where Krishna begins to explain, in the very last verse of that second chapter, Srila Prabhupada summarizes that this is all of these wonderful teachings that Krishna explains to Arjuna in terms of, you're not this body, you're the spirit soul, and the spirit soul never dies, and in so many ways is giving various arguments for Arjuna not to be overly anxious as he has become. Vast majority of people don't have this basic knowledge and understanding, and therefore they continue to be and increase actually their entanglement in the material world. Anyone who comes in contact with this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam has the tools to practically, we were reading that verse just a few days ago, to immediately stop our suffering in the material world. To immediately, that option is given to us, if we take the process seriously, to immediately get off the bodily platform, because that's the cause of our suffering. And the the kind of realizations that one can develop or one can receive is through this very process, personal process of bhakti, which, as nicely underlined here, we can't establish our relationship with Krishna unless we first learn to establish our relationship with the spiritual master and with Vaishnavas. That is why dealings amongst Vaishnavas are so important. They prepare us, they help us to this is the basic message being referred to here. Not only we become servant of God, but rather we become servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of God. Isn't it? Yeah. I think the sun has set. Probably sometime back. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai,
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Gaura Premanandi. We are missing Raghumeshwar today. Farmers are busy people.